Presentations. This evening, we will receive a presentation from Scott Lawrence, Superintendent of San Mateo Union High School District, on the district's facility planning.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to apologize up front. I'll probably call you board members, just because that's the group I'm usually talking to.
Worse than that.
And I had the good pleasure of sitting and meeting with Connie and talking about the need for us to inform you about one of the things that's sitting in front of our school board right now, and that is the potential relocation of Peninsula High School and the consolidation potentially of our district office and other maintenance and operations types of activities. I know you have a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of information that I could share. Ms. Jackson and I were talking about how this is really fascinating work for me, and I love getting into this very deeply. Sometimes what happens, though, is that I get really excited about some of the information, and I go way too deep. So I'm going to try to give you a brief overview of what is sitting in front of the board and give you some information about what the options are sitting in front of the board and the timeline. And then what I'd really like to do is answer questions. I have a number of my staff here tonight, and answer any questions that you may have and listen to any comments that you might want to share with us that I can take back to the school board. I was hired here in San Mateo 3 years ago, and if you can remember 3 years ago, one of the first things that we had to deal with was that the school district had about $75 million in what were called COPs, Certificates of Participation, that were weighing very heavily on our general fund. The paying off and the feesing of those things created a situation where we were looking at trying to figure out how we could find that sort of money to pay off the debt so we could put the money back into the school district. Well, one of the things that we started to look at was what we could do with one of our assets, and one of our assets was the Peninsula, the Crestmore site. And so we went through the 7-11 committee, and I actually walked into the middle of that and spent a number of meetings up here in the San Bruno area with people sharing their thoughts about what we should do with the Crestmore site or not to do with the Crestmore site. Well, instead of going through and following through with the idea of what we could do with that asset, we went in a different we put on the ballot, and we passed a bond measure called Measure O. And in that, what happened was that we were able, through the generous vote of our community, we were able to get the money for that $75 million in COPs and pay it off. And since that point in time, we've really not had to worry too much about debt. We're in excellent fiscal shape. The district is very easily prepared to face what's going to come up, we think, in the next few years as far as the state budget. But one of the other things that we did in Measure O is we decided that it was also time to do the last two big projects as far as the district was concerned. Over the last about 10 years, we've put almost $600 million of investment into the various different schools in our school district. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see the Cappuccino site over the course of the last year or so. In about 2 weeks, they're going to be moving back into almost every facility on the campus except for the theater. And it is a phenomenally beautiful campus, probably one of the more beautiful campuses in the entire peninsula. But that's with about $80 million of work being done on it over the last 3 years. So a lot of positive things are going on, but the last two projects and the last two things that we kind of said we were going to do was we were going to try to find an alternative site for the Peninsula students. Crestmore is very nice and as a location, but the actual buildings are starting to fall apart, and we haven't put much into them over the course of the last 20, 30 years. The other thing that we decided we were going to do is the last big thing where superintendents kind of go to get fired, is to rebuild our facilities, our district office facilities, our maintenance and operations, technology, all those things. And we can do it because we're effectively at the end of our construction program across the entire district. Well, the board is coming up with some of the The board is looking towards considering three basic options as far as the district office facilities and the Peninsula High School. The first one is, the first goal is we would like to move the Peninsula site, if possible, to a more centrally located location on the peninsula. It's a challenge with about 2/3 of the students that come to Peninsula being from effectively the San Mateo, Burlingame, Millbrae corridor right along El Camino, Rollins Road in that area and down towards San Mateo High School. So there's a large group of students, and later on in the PowerPoint presentation and some other documents I sent you, you can see the concentration of where the students are. So it's difficult for the students to get up to Peninsula, and we bus, but if it rains, we'll lose 40% of the students on a daily basis, just because it's difficult for the students to get up there. Most of them don't drive, and so it's a challenge, especially since we don't have public transportation that goes up there. One of the options is that we can purchase property. We do have it in our bond fund that we can purchase property someplace in a more centrally located area and build a 1, 2, or 3. We don't have to put it all together on one site. We can build a bus yard, technology center, district office one place. We can build Peninsula in another place. So we have the options of putting it all together on one complex or separating it out and putting it into 2 or 3 different sites. We can upgrade Crestmore, or the entire site. That would entail us probably tearing down some of the buildings and building a school and putting our facilities back up there. Or we can build it on one of the other locations that we currently own, which is one of our comprehensive sites. All 3 of those options have pros and cons. All 3 of those options have costs that are, like if we purchase property, that's $20 million, $30 million that we couldn't put into our, renovating some of our other sites. Putting it on a comprehensive site, there are pros and cons, and I'm sure you've heard, it's been in the paper for the last few months, that there are concerns about putting it on the comprehensive sites. Rebuilding up at Crestmore is a long-term commitment for the school district, as far as, that means that we're going to retain that property for a long, long time. So there's pros and cons to everything that we do, and the board was meeting with, you have more people here than we do. At a normal school board meeting, we usually have 2 or 3, and they sit in the back of the room and they kind of nod. And we're doing this in January, February. Well, we've actually been working on this for about 18 months. January, February, we were all looking around, going, we're heading towards a decision, and nobody knows we're even talking about it. So I've been going out with my staff to everywhere that I can possibly find a gathering and explaining what is going on in front of the board. And democracy can be messy, and we have generated a lot of comments over the course of the last 2 months. We feel better for it because at least now people are engaged. They know what we're trying to do and the decisions that are sitting in front of the board. So I can go into great, like I said, I can go into great detail. I can go through the pros and cons in great detail of all the various different things. But if you've had a chance to look at some of the material, I'm here to actually listen, answer some questions, have staff answer questions, and I think that might be a good use of our time.
So you're still planning on trying to relocate Peninsula, and you want to consolidate some maintenance facilities in a more central location, is that correct?
We're looking at one of 3 options as far as upgrading the Peninsula facilities. One of the options is just rebuilding where it's at right now. Again, there's pros and cons to that. Buying property is another one, or putting it on a comprehensive site. We also want to consolidate we're scattered all over the place as far as our maintenance yard, our bus yards, our food service facilities, our technology. So we do want to consolidate as much of that as we possibly can. It doesn't have to be with Penn. It can be in a separate location.
So at this point, you don't have any long-term plans for the site? We're getting calls all the time from people saying, what do they think? They're going to do something, they're going to develop, and what's going to happen? I mean, where does that all stand now? I understand the economy's been down and values have been down and stuff, but if things perk up as they seem to be a little bit, what's your long-term plan?
Well, currently the board right now has not talked, since we figured out how to defease the $75 million in COPs, we just look at it as an asset, a long-term asset. There have been no conversations about doing anything with it, actually, because we don't anticipate the need to have to do anything with it. And so I would say, unless something comes up that we can't anticipate, we've been trying to find a tenant. I mean, we've been trying to find, charter schools come in there, private schools. We've been actively going out looking for tenants to rent the property. And that, I would say, is about as far as a long-term commitment. We have to make this decision, and then it will be 3 to 5 years before it can actually come to fruition. So that's about how far out we've looked as far as, what's going to go on. For the next 5 years, and again, I'm using that knowing how long it takes things to get through construction and design and all that. We're looking 3 to 5 years before we would even be able, if we decide to move Penn, it'll be that long before we have to get down that path.
Any questions, Rico?
Through the chair, I was at one of those meetings at the Little Theater at Cappuccino. So I still recall, so I'm sure you still do because you were in front of the stage. Some of the concerns of the residents, as what the mayor indicated, we do get calls. It's assumed that with the Measure O that passed, that you would be clearing out of the site eventually, which seems to be on that path, in order to actually get rid of that surplus property and to sell it. And then, of course, that's where the residents, especially in that neighborhood in the area, have great concerns, as you heard that night as I did. The other thing is that we've had, throughout the times, Mr. Johnson, Sam Johnson, who stood there, and my former principal at CAP, and I said, is this going to be it as far as coming back and asking for another measure, another parcel tax? The answer was yes, but however, something else came up. So I guess I'm wondering, and I know I get this question, is so they move, they get property, and they go down the path again. Are they going to be coming back to us asking for more? And yes, I've been to CAP, and it certainly is a different school than when I was there. And it's beautiful. It took a little bit, a couple measures to get it accomplished, some cost overrides, honestly, that didn't accomplish it the first time around. So I think that's some of the things, is the property surplus, as the mayor indicated, and just as far as the managing of the funds and whether or not everything's going to get accomplished this time.
I would say that we've gone through 3 measures: Measure D, Measure M, and now we're in Measure O. What you're seeing right now is Measure D happened well before I was here, and the cost overruns that you were talking about, and especially if Sam was standing up here talking about it, that was a long time ago for us and the board, and the board's actually turned over quite a bit since that point in time because of some of the issues that happened with Measure D. Measure M has been amazing. We have been able to do so many more things than we actually even said we were going to do. We've put solar that has created a boon for our general fund. We've been able to generate revenue streams out of this bond measure, and we've done so much more than we actually anticipated out of Measure M. We're thinking that Measure O finishes it off. That's our goal, that's our belief, and if things keep going the way that things are going, I would say that that's a fairly strong statement, that we won't be looking to go out, again, unless something happens in the economy that we need to go out for a parcel tax. But there's no anticipation now to go out for anything at all.
Michael?
Thank you. You mentioned that there are several pros and cons to looking at all of the options that you're considering, and then you also said that there's really no long-term analysis that's been done on the current campus in terms of what could be done with it, whether it would be sold or leased out. So I'm wondering, is the financial aspect of this not one of those things that's being factored, and how could you actually make that decision without understanding what the opportunity cost of that property is and how that would impact your decision?
One of our biggest concerns right now that we're facing as a district is we have growth, and it seems really strange because the growth is all in the southern part of the district, and we actually are facing, I don't know if in the northern part of the district we're actually seeing a decline in enrollment, but we anticipate that over the course of the next 8 to 10 years, we're going to see a rise of maybe 2,000 students. It's a possibility. So having been in education for over 30 years and having seen properties be sold off as assets because of the time you don't think you need it or whatever, we've been actually, as a staff, been pushing that it would not make sense for us, knowing that we're facing growth, to sell off an asset. What we do not want to have happen, though, is to have an asset not be used in something. We look for revenue streams every place we possibly can. And again, that's why we've been going out trying to find somebody that would be willing to rent the property, because there's a lot of extra empty space up there. Peninsula only takes up a small portion of it. So we've been actively trying to find other renters to go into it. And that's where we're at, is that I don't believe there's a long-term plan. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not the school board, because I can't do that. there hasn't been any discussion about selling the property. It's been about what's best for the kids and the Peninsula students, and then what do we do with the asset to not lose it as an asset, but to generate revenue off of it somehow, some way.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and please keep us posted.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
and if you,
I'm just saying, could you introduce since they've made the trip and they had to sit here polite and look interested, could you maybe introduce so
why
you
don't
know
you
who
go
they are?
ahead? Don, why don't you- or Kurt, go ahead, sir.
Do it at the podium so that you're on TV, yeah, all the way over there.
Big chance to be on TV. Kirk Black, Associate Superintendent of Human Resources and Administrative Services.
Ron Campana, new Assistant Principal at Peninsula High School.
I'm Kindy Stump, Director of Attendance and Welfare and Alternative Programs.
Don Scatena, I'm the principal of Peninsula High School.
Great.
Thank you.
And just, I would like to say, Connie has been I think we have a good working relationship and feel comfortable calling and talking to each other. And I really want to make sure that you understand we're trying to do outreach so people don't get surprised by what's going on. And any comments that you have or that you want to forward to us from your community, please do so. We look forward to that, and I will share that with the board.
We will. Thank you very much.